All right, welcome back, everyone. It is March 8th, 2022, and you've joined the Athens-Clarke County Commission and myself, Mayor Kelly Gertz, for our monthly work session. And we have just two items tonight. We're going to talk about fiscal year 23 compensation with our human resources staff and others. And then we're going to discuss the small transit-intensive communities transportation agreement that we have with the University of Georgia with our transit staff. So to begin, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Assistant Manager Josh Edwards, who's going to introduce staff who will discuss our compensation presentation.
Yes, Mayor Gertz, good to be here tonight. First off, we have our FY23 compensation recommendations, and our Director of HR, Jeff Hale, and our Assistant Director, Laura Welch, are here to present their recommendations, and we look forward to the conversation and any questions that y'all have. With that, we'll hand it off to them.
You're muted, Jeff.
Try that again. Hope everybody's doing well this evening and staying dry where you are. Laura and I are going to speak to you tonight a little bit about where we are with compensation and where we'd like to go for FY23 with your careful consideration. And so Laura's going to lead a presentation, and we'll chime in as we go and certainly entertain any questions or concerns or thoughts you may have.
Okay, everybody, I'm sharing my screen.
It's there.
This has been quite a year for an HR department. So we presented this for the managers, and we want to share it with you. We've done a lot of work. So the purpose of this presentation is to first provide you with information about our current labor market, which if you watch the news, I'm sure you're very familiar with all the things that we're contending with. We also want to give you guidance for effective pay maintenance within ACC Gov. This is a very important thing that we might not have done so much in the past, but we really want to address now. We also want to look at the FY23 recommendations for pay table, three things: pay table, market, and performance increases for employees, both in the unified plan, which is our civilian regular employees, and then also in the public safety step plans. And then we want to give you a status update on the $15 minimum wage impact study that we'll be undertaking as part of the budget process. Okay. All right, so I want to start with the threats that we're facing as an organization right now. And these threats are to service provision in the form of pay, basically. So in terms of what we're contending with, we have three main areas. First of all, we have had situations where employees have not progressed in their pay. They've been here for a long time. We see issues of compression. As part of the pay study, we saw a little bit of inequity and loss of trust, employee disengagement due to disappointment, and then employee dissatisfaction. We've also seen a lot of turnover this year. We've seen a big increase in turnover, which results in disruptions in operations. The people that are here are having to work harder, so we see declining morale. The people that are leaving are taking institutional knowledge with them, and it costs a lot to get somebody new in here and train them up. With regard to the current labor market across the country, we're seeing that wages are higher, benefits are enhanced in other places. We see inflation rising faster than wages. We see labor shortages. And we see also, and we've adjusted to this, we see a lot of employers offering flexibility and enhanced remote and leave options, which we have to compete in that market now. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide. This is just some citations of what's in the news based, related to our current labor market. But basically it speaks to everything in the previous slide, the threats that we're facing as an organization. This slide demonstrates, excuse me, my PowerPoint is rebooting for some reason. Hold on. Okay, get back to where I was. Okay, sorry about that. So we've seen a sharp increase in turnover over the last, I would say, 2 years since the advent of COVID. And you can see in pink there our COVID time period. But what I want to highlight in this slide is the difference in turnover among different types of employees. So you see at the bottom, the blue line is a fairly stable line. We have employees between 5 and 10 years that are most of the way toward earning vesting in their pension. So that group is relatively stable. Where you see higher turnover is with the newer employees who have less than 5 years. We're seeing dramatic increases there. And it's increasing for newer employees and for those who have already vested. And so luckily that pension would appear to be working in terms of retention, but it's only working if they get most of the way toward earning it or if they've already earned it. Any questions on that slide?
How long does it take for an employee to vest?
10 years. So this sort of summarizes what is on that slide. Go ahead.
And I was just going to offer that 10 years, it's fully funded by the government, so employees aren't making any contributions to that pension. So I think there's some trade-off there that certainly we're looking at potential design options going forward that we hope to be able to present in the next year or so.
Hey, Laura, I do have a question on, oh, are we just chiming in here? Laura, a question on Jesse has a raised hand. I see that. Okay, just jumping in here. But anyway, back on the 0 to 5 year group of people who have, we're at the high rate, is there any significance? I mean, are people leaving after a year, or does it spread evenly among those groups of people, 1, 2, 3, 4? Are we see people starting and then just not staying after a year or two?
I'd have to dig deeper into the data. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
But typically, if I would say the shorter the tenure, the shorter, they're going to leave. If they're going to leave, they're going to leave sooner rather than later. But I'd have to dig deeper into the data.
I would offer that our turnover started to tick up in 2018, which was the sort of front wave of the boomer exodus that everyone had predicted. And then we had higher turnover driven by our public safety, particularly in law enforcement. And then we had the COVID and the sort of broader economic trends of labor shortage and resignation and higher inflation and higher wages all come together in this latter period. And traditionally, or at least in the literature, the younger employees, millennials and younger, tend to have very short tenure with organizations. So that's another underlying demographic that is perhaps borne out here.
Jesse, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I'm just curious, in my kind of skimming of the presentation ahead of time, and so far in this, I haven't heard retirement mentioned, and I'm just curious how much of this is retirement, because in my mind, at least, there's sort of a difference between people retiring and people leaving to go elsewhere, or leaving to go nowhere.
You have that built in there, yeah. Go ahead,
I can tell you we had 67 retirements last year, but we had how many? I'll have to.
That's probably close to double previous years. So good question.
Yeah.
And some of that's driven by the pandemic.
And compared to overall separations, though, it's a small percentage of our total separations, which are in the hundreds. Okay. Anything else on this slide? Okay, this sort of summarizes the takeaways from the previous slide, which is that overall turnover is extremely high. We're running almost to 18% right now. So our historical average is about 10%. In January of 2021, we saw an increase to 12%, but even more importantly, exempt turnover then matched non-exempt turnover. And now both exempt and non-exempt are at their highest levels ever. We would usually expect to see more turnover in the non-exempt.
And Laura, that's measured on an annual basis, is that right?
You're asking about the turnover rate?
Yeah, it's either fiscal year. Typically, we look at fiscal years, but we also look at calendar year. Carol.
Can you review the difference between the exempt and the non-exempt?
Sure. An exempt employee is not entitled to overtime. Those are your more executive and professional positions. Non-exempt are entitled to time and a half overtime for anything over 40 within a work week.
I had a quick question. Have we at all taken a look at the demographics related to turnover? I wonder, I mean, like with I thought of this because of retirement. Obviously, those are people that are nearing the end or at the end of a career, you know, so older adults. But I just wonder to what degree these trends are also mirroring national trends with regards to different career habits of different generations, as well as different populations. To see to what degree, like, we are experiencing something worse than average with regards to, let's say, younger folks, you know, leaving the organization or something like that.
Right. We have worked with our consultants, Aon especially, that help us with the defined benefit and deferred compensation plans to look at our retirement plans and see. So we've done some focus groups and some surveying around that, to see if our offerings are aligning with what younger people would prefer. But Jeff, do you want to speak to analyzing the demographics? We've done some of that too.
Yeah, I would say that you know, typically our workforce is a little bit older than average. We tend to attract an older employee in mid-career. We are certainly seeing younger employees turnover more than other groups. Whether that's significantly worse than some other organization, I can't speak to. And of course, I think maybe potentially to your point, or to where you may be thinking, you know, we're going to be talking strictly about the extent to which pay may speak to this problem. This is a multivariate problem that we would all agree, you know, we're not going to outpace the private sector in attracting people in terms of salaries. We just don't have those resources. And so we have to focus across the board. And we're doing that. In this presentation, you know, we're focused on pay as an immediate sort of need, where some of these things are really creating operational deficits, that the first order of business is probably around pay. But there are certainly cultural things and in the organization that we're all aware of a lot of initiatives in play that we think will improve things, from different pathways into the organization to different retirement offerings, enhanced benefits, of course, the work of the inclusion office and workforce development.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And definitely part of a larger conversation we need to keep having about cultural shifts that can help us retain and attract employees of a, you know, diverse backgrounds. So thanks.
No question about it.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of our strategic plan. So these are basically our pay-based solutions are tied up in 3 things in the unified plan and 2 things in the public safety step plan. In the unified plan, we have pay table adjustments, we have market adjustments, and we have performance pay. In the step plan, we have pay table adjustments and we have step increases. We don't offer the performance pay in step plans. So in HR, we talk about, recruit, retain, and reward. So these pay tools are designed to do those 3 things. In the step plans, of course, you're looking at your reward being longevity, not necessarily tied to pay.
And they have an extensive rank structure where promotional opportunities on that side is tantamount to performance pay, where they have many more opportunities for that. And so it's just a different way of looking at pay.
But it's important to have equity and investments in both plans. Also, it's important to remember that we have a pay classification system to which we have to adhere. And also our constitutional officers have to adhere to this, although they have a little bit more, if they're not part of the personnel system, they don't have to adhere to some of our hiring processes. But similar positions are grouped to establish and maintain that market of competitiveness. We analyze jobs, and similar work is paid similarly. We have to have accountable stewardship for our tax dollars, so we need to be consistent. We need to always be using a valid methodology for valuation of our work, and we also need to always have safe, effective service delivery, which means that we need to make sure that everyone coming into the organization meets those minimum qualifications. So we're very much tied to this across the entire organization. Okay, I realize the type on this slide is really small. I hope you can see it, but this tells a very important story. You see at the top, we have the 3 different types of pay adjustments. We have pay table adjustments, we have market adjustments, we have performance management adjustments. So these 3 things go into maintaining our pay. Pay table adjustments are applied across all positions to our pay table, and that's a much smaller cost than market adjustments or performance adjustments. So a pay table adjustment is going to be across the board. It's going to adjust salaries for people coming into the organization. That keeps us competitive in recruitment. Market adjustments are an across-the-board increase that is based on the cost of the employment inflation factor. So that is basically an adjustment to keep our employees level with inflation. It needs to be equal to or greater than the pay table adjustment, because as you're bringing people in, the people that we already have here need to keep step with them and not feel that they're being passed. That would cause pay compression if we don't offer a market adjustment equal to and almost always greater than a pay table adjustment. Any questions about that? And then our third tool is, of course, the performance pay. And if you look at this column and the values in this column, we have not been able to offer performance pay for many of the last 12 fiscal years, or have not chosen to. That is just an area where we may have allowed for some compression to occur by not adhering to that pay philosophy. We have not. We've retained through market adjustments, but we have not rewarded on a regular basis.
When you look back at the history, in terms of the intention of managing the pay plan, it's been a bit haphazard. And so the result is we may do pretty well with the market adjustments over time, but not the pay table. Or we may do the pay table a couple times, but not performance. And so these are things that create, disruption in our ability to recruit, retain, reward folks. And what we're looking for in this presentation to convey are two things. One is what should the number be for each of these tools every year that we apply in a normal year? And if it's not a normal year, what does that recommend? And for example, not every year is 2008 or 2020. Neither is every year 2022. And so we need to be intentional and understand the mechanics of these plans if we're going to maintain them. And we want to offer some guidance in that regard.
And it's important also, as we were discussing in our budget meeting today, that we look at trend data. We need to look at trends over time and have a good handle on the decisions that we make and how they might impact us in future years.
Laura, I know there are a few questions about this slide, so I want to stick here for a second because, of course, you got a lot sort of in one illustration. So I think Patrick had his hand up first, so I'll start with Patrick.
Okay, just a quick question to Jeff Hale. Are you saying that the market adjustment and performance management have not been in line, and it's the adjustment is causing some complications? Can you repeat that again?
At times, for example, as Laura was stating, when you move the pay table, which means we're taking all of our salary ranges and updating them, increasing them so that we're competitive with other local governments. When you do that, if you don't also give the employees an equivalent or greater market adjustment, they lose ground with everybody else. So that has happened through this data. And then for our high-performing folks, we've told them that the way that they advance and distinguish themselves and move through their pay ranges through performance management, which we have not funded for whatever reason. And some of those reasons are we didn't have the funds. So the question is, what should the amounts be each year to keep these things in balance and recruit effectively, retain the people we have, and reward our high achievers?
Well, Jeff, let me offer another perspective here, as opposed to what we didn't do to what we did do. So we did a pay study in FY19 for the first time, in 23 years, 25 years. And the problem with compression is, if you don't do performance increases, then there really is no separation for those folks that are performing. And as you can see, there was a commitment after the end of the pay study to begin investing in our performance pay. So we did that. And Jeff's right, for everybody else and virtually everybody gets some amount of performance pay. There's only a handful of folks that score below a 3 on our old performance evaluation system. And we did have some market adjustments here. As you can see, they were small. And of course, we started with the step plan in 21. So, it's the questions are still on the table as Jeff proposed them, but you can see beginning in 19, really 18, that we started with the new pay study, a fresh look at it. And certainly, I think, as you'll see in the rest of the presentation, there's a need to further step up our game on performance, market, and pay table. But we have been trying to invest in the employees in the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, I would argue more than we ever have before. So I just wanted to share that.
And Blaine, I thank you for that, because I think the segue here is that where we don't want to be is where we were in the lead up to 2018-19. And so from the standpoint that we've done some major investment, now we need to move forward and maintain the plans the way we know we can and should, so we don't get back in that situation again. So that is the complete thought, I think, from my point of view.
Mariah, you had a question on this slide?
Yeah, hopefully my co-pilot over here will be quiet so I can talk. But anyway, so my question comes back to my earlier point as well. Particularly in response to hearing y'all talk about, analyzing trends, looking at sort of the quantitative data behind this drive for us to adjust our pay, which, based on this background for the last 10 years, like we need to do regardless. But again, curious to see to what degree other factors are driving turnover. I was wondering if you all have collected or made use of any qualitative data, particularly like exit surveys or anything like that, to see, again, to what degree it really is about pay, or if it's like people, are quitting because they're scared of getting the coronavirus, or other factors that may have influenced the uptick.
Right. You want to speak to that, Jeff?
Yeah, we do provide for exit interview data in a qualitative way. We do not have a system to report out. And so as we are in the coming months look to implement the Munis upgrade to our software, we are hoping to have some better capability. Anecdotally, sure, the reasons are replete with all the reasons why people leave jobs. Pay is consistently in the top 2, 3, anecdotally.
Got a few more questions. I'll just go across the screen. Carol?
Yeah, I'm just checking my understanding of this. The market adjustment affects the people who are already working. When you make a market adjustment here, does it affect the base pay for that position grade as well, or is that the pay table adjustment?
That's the pay table adjustment.
Okay, so if let's say here where we had this 750,000 market adjustment, and let's say you were going in somewhere and the engineer salary, the standard starting salary was 50,000 for that. Someone who was in there got the 750,000. No, that's not the increase. They didn't get 700. They got an increase. They'd be really happy with that increase. But it didn't affect that 50,000 for that position in general, like if there was a new slot. And so that, right. And so the, when we had the compression, you have to have the market adjustment, or you're going to run into compression when we did something with our lower wage salary people getting 15. That's correct as well, I assume.
Correct. When we implemented the $15 wage floor, it created compression, which is what the wage study that we're going to do.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, and it looks to me that prior to 2 years ago, we did not consistently have performance pay increases.
That's correct.
Okay. Would someone else call market adjustment cost of living increase?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
They would. We don't call it that only because the indicator we use is the employment cost index for local government, which is the cost of employment. So, but it's the same concept.
Okay.
Got Jesse, then Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad Commissioner Parker brought up the qualitative data thing. I heard you say, Jeff, that there's not really a method currently existing for reporting that out. But if there's some way to develop that, I think that would be super helpful for informing us as policymakers on what beyond pay, we might need to be considering. So if there is some way to get some of that information in the future, I do think that would be super helpful for us. I had 2 questions about this table. The first was just trying to understand pay table versus minimum wage, because when I was first going through this, I was sort of surprised to see 0, but we brought up the wage floor to 15. And I think as I heard you describing it, Laura, I understand pay table to be a term that would, we'd only see a number reflected here if we had made some kind of adjustment to all entry-level positions, regardless of whether they were at 15 or not. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, that helps me make sense of why there's zeros where I thought there would be some kind of more substantial number.
We identified some 27 positions, and so that's out of 1,700 authorized and 400 different jobs that we have. So we would be looking at a pay table adjustment as something that affected the structure, the salary ranges for all positions. Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess for performance management, I'm curious like what the method is for rewarding people based on their evaluations, and if there's sort of a standard methodology that goes out to all departments, or if there's just an allocation and then different departments can handle what they do differently. And if you all could elaborate on that, that'd be helpful just to understand.
Each department is given an allocation based on their personnel services budget. So they're given a pot of money, basically. Then the department directors, it's at their discretion, they establish ranges around the performance evaluations that they did and assign percentage increases of performance pay to those ranges within their department. So it is at the discretion of the department director.
But it is based on a standard evaluation process that's administered by HR.
Thanks a lot. I guess just to kind of wrap up in a bow, the question around pay table, if we want to move forward, making sure we're addressing that, minimum wage issue we were trying to address in this past fiscal year, would that be captured by the kind of standardization you were looking for around pay table, Jeff? Or would there need to also be some kind of consideration that took into account that, living wage calculator idea?
I think you're perhaps better served by looking at the pay table as a way of staying competitive with comparable jurisdictions. And you can choose, in addition to that, to make sure that the lower end of that meets some threshold that you're comfortable with, whether you want to call it a living wage or a minimum wage or wage floor. That can be done going forward.
Thanks, Jeff. Mike?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I think Blaine answered this. Under performance management, those pay raises, it's Blaine mentioned there's a handful of people that do not get that. So I imagine majority of employees do get some of those percentages when we were able to allocate them. Am I right in saying that?
So the way it would work is so a director has this sort of
right.
ability.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just asking about the numbers about employees. I mean, if do 95% of the employees get some sort of performance management and 5% don't, or do you have? That's where I'm going with this. I know how it works.
The handful is probably 10 or less people in my experience.
Okay, that's good to know. And I will say this about the pay table adjustment. I'm curious to see the rest of the presentation, but that was part of what we were trying to address in the last budget with the 12.2. The 12.2% came from the compression thing that was done in the pay study that we did in FY19 and FY20 for that would have raised that pay table. So I look forward to the rest of the presentation that makes some recommendations about how we can fix the pay table, market adjustment, and performance management. Thanks, Joe.
Let me point out one quick thing to Commissioner Hamby's question. If you look at FY20, 2% for performance management. Practical effect of that, if you don't have a market adjustment in there, and that's a pay study here, but at any rate, if you don't have a market adjustment and I only have 2% to work with, I'm probably going to make sure everybody gets as much as I can give everybody in a fair way, as opposed to rewarding the high performer and leaving everybody else out in the cold. So again, right. if you don't coordinate these, you do sort of warp the incentives.
And I hear you saying that, Jeff, and I don't disagree with that. And I want to put that in context with, for the previous years, why we, for example, in FY13, we gave a $500 market adjustment. And a lot of times it's dictated by budget constraints. And so when we gave a market adjustment, we recognized that everybody in our operation would get that amount. And we wanted to make sure of that. So, and sometimes we had to sacrifice the performance management raise in order to make sure everybody got a market adjustment pay. So I just want to give some context to that because I didn't want it to seem like during these years we were ignoring the performance management aspect when we weren't. It was just more of it was just more of budget constraints from that standpoint. So
In FY13, we're still coming out of the trough of the
Sure.
session.
exactly.
This, I don't want this to come across as negative. So it's understood that in the public sector, we're going through some of these and sometimes extreme times. All that we're suggesting and going to suggest is that in a normal year, here's a range to shoot for. You know you're going to have these other circumstances. And when you do what you can. But then in the out years, you try to, when things are better, you try to address those deficits and don't forget about them so you don't create a huge debt to the employees. That's all we're saying. This isn't, we also know, and bears mentioning during these times, we didn't abolish jobs or lay people off or have furloughs because we protected people's jobs. So these are
that's a good
points.
point, and that's a good point, Jeff, and a good point to highlight, especially during FY08 and FY09, which aren't on here. I mean, there wasn't a single time where we laid anybody off, and that's to your credit and management's credit for that happening. So,
Any other questions about this slide before we move on?
I have one real quick.
Go ahead.
That's okay. So I'm glad that Commissioner Myers brought up the definition of market adjustment, because I had kind of assumed that it also was referring to a cost of living increase. And so I'd love to hear more about exactly how that is calculated, like the cost of employment going up, and how that could be compared with what the cost of living increases each year. So if that's a lot to sort of say off the cuff, if we could get some sort of follow up for, these years, particularly as turnover began to tick up, the degree to which our market adjustments were lining up with the cost of living increase, and to sort of understand if that was perhaps a reason why turnover was increasing, and then also factor that into what our decisions are on the FY23 budget.
Yeah, and we certainly look at both of those numbers, the cost of living, the consumer price index, but what we base the market adjustment on is the employment inflation index. So
we'll come back around with some more information.
Yeah. Okay, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and move forward.
All right. In doing our study and making these recommendations, we had help from the finance department, and looking at our vacancies. A different way to look at our vacancies is to look at how many people are participating in our retirement plans year over year. This gets us at a sort of an index of what our vacancy rate is year over year. So if you look, and we don't have FY22 on here because we're in the midst of FY22, but obviously, our estimated full-time vacant positions, it is increasing. And the only takeaway from this slide is we all know that we have vacancies and that we're contending in a difficult labor market. But we budget at our compensation budget is budgeted at full employment, but our actual spend is flat. So that first line, the 4 lines at the bottom summarize, that first line is our full-time compensation spend in actual dollars. And that's remained fairly flat since FY18. Our general fund compensation budget, however, has increased. And so those funds are left unspent at the end of the fiscal year, and they're reallocated to certain things within our budget, certainly. That's basically what we wanted to show on this slide, is that we do budget at full employment, and we leave a lot of money on the table. Carol? Oh, I'm sorry, Kelly.
Sorry. What are manual vacancy reductions? The last line.
That is where we set aside money, salary savings for other purposes, where we know we're going to have salary savings, and so we set that money aside. Am I misspeaking, Jeff? That's correct, isn't it? Manual vacancy reductions.
I think what that refers to is the attempt to try to make some prediction about what our vacancies would be, and to set some of that aside.
Okay, so our baseline maintenance that we're proposing tonight, and I'll go through where we got these numbers. So we talked about the two different pay plans and the tools associated with those. From the unified plan, we would say a baseline amount that you need to be looking at from year to year is 1.59 million. And then for the public safety plan, or STEP plan, you would have a baseline amount year over year of 945,000 for a total of 2.54 million per year that you probably should expect to budget every year to maintain our classification and pay system.
For the general fund.
For the general fund alone. That's no enterprise funds. So let's start with the unified plan. And this again is for maintenance. This is our baseline fiscal year adjustment. So we have those three tools. We have the 1% market, the 1% PMP, and the 1% pay table. For the general fund, for the 1% market adjustment, for every 1% adjustment, it'll be $290,000. For PMP, it's a little bit more at $310,000. And for a 1% pay table adjustment, it's only $50,000 because that is, of course, for people we're bringing in. Down at the bottom, we have a maintenance range. We're suggesting ranges for each of these three tools. So for the pay table, we can expect to have to raise the pay table between 2 and 4%. For market adjustments based on the employment inflation index, we're looking at 2 to 5%. And for performance pay, we would hope that the commission could award somewhere between 1 and 3% every year. And you can see the totals at the bottom of 100,000 at 2% this year. We're recommending a 2% pay table adjustment, a 3% market adjustment, and a 2%, this is baseline, I'm sorry, performance adjustment. So every year, if the target amounts were 2, 3, and 2%, that gets you to that 1.59 million.
The idea is based on conditions and as Commissioner Hanby points out, available resources and budget, you would modulate around these figures, reasonably so. And in a good year, a market increase might exceed a range. Certainly in a bad year, you would expect it maybe not to be in range, and that's okay. This is just for reference points about what we would need to stay level.
Okay, for our maintenance of our public safety pay plan, you don't have that performance piece. You have pay table, and then you have your step increases. So a 1% pay table increase for the general fund equates to $305,000, and a step increase, which we have for annually, we do 2 per year, would be $300,000. If you're looking at our ranges for pay table, again, 2 to 4%. And then for steps, depending on people's individual circumstances, their hire date and things like that, we expect between $330,000 to $350,000 per year. So our FY targets are 2% or $615,000 per year, and then $330,000 for the step increases, for a total of $945,000. Any questions on that one?
Could you, on terms of the general fund versus all fund, what is the difference there? I mean, I thought I understand it with the unified plan because the all fund would include all those. Actually, explain it to me in general. If I'm confused,
Sure.
Someone else could be confused as well.
Well, general fund are those positions that are funded from the general fund. The enterprise funds, and grant funds would be
right.
Funds and special revenue funds. So, for instance, public utilities positions that are funded through the enterprise fund, or solid waste positions that are funded through that enterprise fund.
But on that screen with the one that was before the public safety, when it said general fund and all funds, did the all funds include the general funds then as well, or was
Oh,
that just
yes.
the enterprise? Okay.
I'm sorry. Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then, for example, the market increase, it's really 210,000 for the employees who are getting paid through enterprise funds. So, but then with the public safety, help me with that on the all funds.
That would be grant funded and special.
Okay.
FOCA and VAWA funded folks.
Okay, got it.
Much smaller
Thank you.
amount too. Any questions on this baseline for public safety? Okay, so for our FY23 recommended, and I'll go over where we got these numbers. For the unified plan, we're recommending 2.85 million. For the public safety step plan, we're recommending 2.3 for a total of 5.17 million for total general fund recommended investment in pay increases for FY23. This is 2.6 million over the target. And these are the percentages that we would recommend. If you look down at the bottom, FY23 recommended, we would recommend a 4% pay table adjustment. We have not adjusted the pay table since the pay study. That was in FY19, a full 4 fiscal years ago. The market increase that we would recommend is 7%. And then the performance increase, we would recommend 2% for a total of 2.85 million for a unified plan.
Mike had a question on this slide. Mike, did you have a question on this slide?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I was muted. But it looks like I'm looking at the total percentage of each of these. So between the pay table and market table, it's 11%. And for the whole shebang, it's a 13% increase across to help our unified plan. Is that right? Is that what you're recommending?
I don't think it adds up necessarily to 13% for
7 and 2 is 9, 9 and 4 is 13. Not for every employee, but what I'm saying is if what you're saying, most employees get the 2%, every employee is going to get the 4%, and most employees will probably get the 7%.
Not every employee will get the 4%. That's really just going to hit people who are. Yeah, that will just hit people who fall below the minimum of a pay range. And that's just a handful. That's why it's the cheapest, because it just hits a handful of people.
I got you.
7% everybody gets, and 2% is based on what somebody might get 1% performance.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So no high performer. Every high performer, I guess, would get 9%. I guess is the way to frame that.
Well, Commissioner Hamby, if I might, I think you bring up an important point. And so for the pay table, if we continue just to bump it along at 1% for all those unfilled positions, all positions, raising the minimums. And of course, there is some separation for virtually all employees because of previous performance or market. When those employees, and we've had a huge amount of turnover, if you just give market and performance, then we haven't changed the market posture of the government as far as our salaries. And so the pay table is an important investment in raising those minimums, even as we experience all this turnover, to position ourselves to be more attractive from a pay perspective from new people coming in the organization. Is that fair to say, Jeff? Okay. Thank you all.
And to that point, Blaine, I think from what I've been reading, Forest Park, who doesn't have near the many as number of employees that we have, but I ran across an article in the AJC just last week that they're increasing employee pay anywhere between 7 to 15% for them. So for us to be able to address the market in that way, I think will be good as we reflect on this next budget coming up.
I think there were a few more questions on this slide. Jesse, are you looking at this one?
Yeah, well, mine were actually from the STEP plan. Just generally, I wanted to clarify who's covered by the STEP plan. My understanding it's the police department, the fire department, the sheriffs, office, probation. Do these figures now also include that like handful of corrections? Does it include the handful of positions at the DA's office as well?
Yes.
The investigator jobs are covered by the public safety plan as well.
Okay. And those are the only departments we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. That's
okay.
Correct.
And then do these figures include, I know there's been some discussion around the issue of lateral transfers and how that was being handled. It's been kind of a challenge for the sheriff's department, especially. Do these figures also include addressing that, or is that a separate thing
That's
we
a
should
separate
anticipate
figure.
being introduced in the budget? Okay. Thanks.
Carol?
Yeah, I think this might have been covered in Mike's question, but back to this on here, the 4% would be on new employees going into a position at a base, whatever the salary would be. So just again, and I think we already said this, if we went with this, everyone would be getting the 7%. Employees who are presently working would all get a 7% raise, and many would get 8 or 9% depending on their performance. That's fair. So we talking to a 7 to 9% raise for all employees. Okay, thank you. All not in the step plans.
Right. And yes.
All right. Does everybody understand how those things interplay?
Okay, well, we'll move on to step plan then.
Right.
I had a question. I'm sorry, I had my hand up.
Go ahead, Allison.
Thanks. And I guess I didn't need to interrupt because of the performances in each one of them. And this question I have is probably going to be best for an email follow-up. And what I'm interested in, and I'm reflecting on my 13 years at UGA, is that for performance-based merit raises, making sure that the assessment tool is as current and accurate as it can be and fair and reasonable. So can I get an email that sort of summarizes our performance assessment tool, maybe the last time it was evaluated or upgraded and that sort of thing? And I know it's a little off from what we're talking about. So if we could get a summary so we're all current on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, and we are in process on that, so there's a lot to tell. So
okay, well, and if it turns out to be another work session discussion, but if you know what I'm saying, Laura, if you'll just capture a little bit of something to let us know, and knowing that it's in progress and being updated is helpful to me as well.
Yes, for sure. And we've just updated our core values, and we're developing competencies for every single job that we have, and we're going to go electronic. So there's a lot in store with regard to performance evaluations.
Well, thank you. I look forward to that email when it comes forward, fits into being summarized. Thank you.
All right, look out, child. We're using technology. All right, public safety.
Okay. For our step plan, we are recommending a pay table adjustment of 6%. And then we'll go with we expect step increases with a pay table increase of 6% to increase to $380,000 for a total of $2,320,000 for public safety raises. Many people, when we implemented the step pay plan, many people in public safety received an adjustment with the pay study and received a second adjustment with the implementation of the step plan.
This recognizes the reality of as Blaine pointed out, that the table is messaging and trying to attract people into the organization and maintain our competitiveness, and this market keeps running away as we keep investing. And so 6% pay table adjustment is one that we think would speak to that.
So just in real dollar terms, that would bring a starting police officer to almost $50,000 a year.
Another consideration with regard to public safety is the expense of training. When we lose people in the public safety realm, it does cost a lot for us to, to hire that back in.
And I just wanted to jump in here and make sure everybody knows that the pay table adjustment and reinforce this, the pay table adjustment for the public safety step plan is different than that for the unified government, as in everybody, and you'll see 2 stars there, 2 asterisks. Every employee in the public safety step plan will receive that pay table adjustment. It's on a step. And Jeff, if you could just clarify that at all.
Yeah. So if for some reason through, compensation history, my salary as an officer is above a step, the table has to catch up with me before I can get an increase because I'm essentially above market. I'm already being paid commensurate with my experience in my job. And so if I'm on a step, then I'm going to get this 6%, which is going to be the majority of folks. And even if they're not on a step, the table is catching up to those that aren't. This is good for all of them.
Any questions here?
You see that kind of lateral transfer note on this slide?
Yeah, we wanted to give you guys an estimate of that, but we need a little more time to get a really good estimate of what that number is going to be, so I didn't want to include it here. Okay, let me just summarize the total ask. The total recommendation for pay increases is at about $5 million, hovering around $5 million. That's $2.8 million for the unified, 2.32 for public safety step, for a total of $5.17 million.
And obviously, given that this recommendation is coming from HR and finance, that revenue is seemingly in the coverage range to kind of manage this. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
There we go.
Just a status update on the $15 an hour wage floor impact study. We have contracted with the Siegel Company for consulting services. We are in such a difficult job market that even the pay consultants are slammed. So the earliest that they were able to start work for us, despite awarding this contract back in the fall, was a February and early March start date. So we've signed a contract, and we will commence that work tomorrow. We will be meeting with them tomorrow, and we're targeting late March or early April for a cost estimate of the adjustments that will be required of that study.
And just to be clear, they haven't begun yet, and the belief is they'll be able to take a look at the $15 an hour increase and identify where there's impact and give us at least an order of magnitude around what it might cost to fix that, in consideration of potentially some other increases that are in play as well. So, we will turn and burn and see what we can provide to you in early April.
Thanks for that. And I'll share, I was engaged with some folks from Georgia City Solutions and ARMA, Georgia Municipal Association, and they were expressing the same thing that you just did about doing consulting work for state and local governments right now, that every consultant is backed up, in part, while we're really glad about these federal funds, that means that everybody's out there scrambling to figure out how to do a good job spending them. Jesse, you had a question.
Yeah, if when this consultant hopefully does this, will they be factoring in the anticipated increases staff can expect if we were to implement this recommendation that you just presented to us tonight? Or I guess I'm just wondering how their upcoming report will synthesize with what y'all are recommending here.
Can we take that as a commitment that we'll get all the increases that were? I wouldn't put it on the table because I wouldn't want to preempt anything that may occur with your discussions on the budget or the manager's recommended budget. if we have some relative certainty around something, then I think we could factor it in, and we may just develop some alternative scenarios one way or the other, would be my thought.
All right, any other comprehensive questions? Everybody did a good job, I think, kind of hitting high points as we went through the kind of various elements of the process. And Jeff, Laura, I can't thank you enough. Really appreciate your work on this.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, just one more presentation this evening regarding our Small Transit Intensive Communities federal grant. And so, Blaine, I'll turn it over to you to introduce.
Thank you, Mayor. And we have Pat Hale, our interim transit director, here this evening to present. And Assistant Manager Josh Edwards has been working on this as well. Since 1977, we've had an agreement with the University of Georgia for transit services. And that dynamic changed when we went fare free. And you'll hear a little bit about how they continue through their reporting to help bring more funds here to Athens-Clarke County that we have shared in the past, lost that mechanism with fare free, and staff has been doing an excellent job collaborating with University of Georgia staff to find an equitable solution. And so Pat's here to tell you a little bit about the work they've been up to. And Assistant Manager Edwards, anything you'd add to that?
Ready to go.
Okay, thanks, Pat.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time this evening. Okay, Victor's bringing up our slides for us. All right, so we are, as Blaine said, we'd have an agenda coming towards you. So we just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to provide some additional clarity and an opportunity to ask some questions about what's been going on. Next slide, please. All right. This is just a history slide. Basically, we're going to tell them what we're going to, the purpose of it. We are expecting to have an approval for the agreement that we are about to present to you. This one includes a North Avenue and Prince Avenue new service route that we're proposing. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk a little bit about the long-term relationship, changes in the agreement, Vicky went too fast, and discuss the impacts of STIC and the next steps in the process. Next slide, please. Everything on this slide is relevant. But one of the things I want to point out is, like Blaine said, we've had an agreement with UGA for about 45 years. And so this is the first time pre-COVID that we don't have a contract with UGA. So we have been working really hard to try to get that back in place. Number 4 is another point where it's very beneficial to Athens Transit and UGA. In 2009, UGA voluntarily started reporting their ridership. When they started reporting their ridership, that increased the overall transit ridership as well. The other item I'd like to mention is that in 2013, that is when we actually started that 60-40 split. So that's been in place for quite some time. Thank you. Like you went backwards. See. All right, thank you, sir. All right, and then on this slide is just some additional history. In 2017, in March 17, 2020, of course, we had the COVID, and that sort of caused a reduction in ridership, and also it led to fare free. So that impacted UGA's STIC portion. So, and it also caused us not to have a funding mechanism to provide UGA their portion of STIC in the past as we were able to do. Next slide, please. This slide has the 5 components of the past agreements. So these are the 5 components of each of the past agreements that we had in place. Thank you. This slide is a reason for the partnership. These are 3 significant reasons for the partnership. I know you've already gone through those, so I'm just going to go through them because I know you've already seen all these. All right, go ahead, Victor. All right, so how did we get here? Slide 7. All right. Since what we've been doing since April of 21, once we became aware of the fact that UGA, there was no funding mechanism in order to provide UGA their 60% of the STIC anymore. What we had to do was we had to figure out a way to either come up with either service plan, some type of service option, or a capital project. We had a meeting with GDOT, and one of the things they advised was it's better that we play in the same sandbox because it's beneficial to both parties. So what we did was, this was one of the first options we brought back. We brought all the service back to Sanford Drive because we knew that this was something that UGA, it really benefited UGA. And it also benefited us as well because we got more ridership from it as well. So we brought, UGA found value in that of $300,000. Okay, next slide. Guys, please stop me if I'm going too fast, please stop me. This is the proposed route that we have in place. And please note, this is not a final route. This is going to have to be studied. We have a TDP that you guys have already approved. And once that comes down the pipe, we're going to have them look at it. They'll look at it, they might say no to this Prince Avenue, North Avenue corridor. But what it indicates is that it's service for everybody. There'll be service on North Avenue side, which means there'll be more frequency on North Avenue, and there'll be service on Prince Avenue. The benefits of this route is that in the past, when health science came on board with UGA, it took away our ridership over on Prince Avenue. So now we get that ridership back along with some of UGA riderships because it'll be going down to the arch. Now the North Avenue part gives us more frequency over on North Avenue. Now, we also have some other ideas for that, I'm so sorry, for that part of the service. So we're going to leave it up to the consultants to help us with this route to make sure that if this works and once they do the study and they say, hey, this is a great idea, you guys should go ahead, and that's what we'll go with. But that's where that is right now. Victor, you want to add anything on that one? Okay.
Pat, real quick, one thing I'll say is we want to make it really clear to y'all that historically our transportation agreements didn't deal with service provision, right? So they were opportunities to receive reimbursement for UGA who was paying fares at the time.
Yes.
The reason why this was more complicated is because it's related to service provision now. And so, Pat shared what we've done in FY22, and here's the addition of those things on this slide. But we want to make it clear that this is new, and that's why we're bringing it forward to y'all.
And Pat, this would be in addition to the existing, say, like Route 7 on Prince Avenue, and then the route that's on North Avenue. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Tim, you had a question about this as well?
Yes, I did. Yeah, thank you, Pat. And can you just clarify on this slide? I understand that this is not finalized at all, but moving forward, would this be an additional hourly route that would be going, or what would be the frequency of this additional route?
Right now, we're looking at about 20-minute frequency on that corridor.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
All right.
Everybody. All right, next slide, Victor. This is the cost of that new service. This is what it would cost. UGA's portion of STIC was $828,160 of STIC. It's, as you can see, we had a little residual there that was $17,455. We just took that and threw it into the cost of the study. So they're helping with the cost of the study that we're having done. This would be an additional study. And we have the TDP going, but this one, because we're going to start this service in FY23, just some information that I want to make sure you guys have. We have they're going to do a mini study just on this portion to see if this will work so we can get this in by August of next year. That's the plan. So we're back to, this is how we get here. The impact of fare free. Fare free impacted the two funding sources, fare box revenue and STIC funding. It eliminates the ability to apply UGA's earned STIC funds to fare credits. UGA requests the equivalent value in ACC transit services in a services or capital project. But the end result, it adds benefits to the entire community. Normally, I don't read the whole slide, but I just thought that was a great idea. I liked all of that. So, Josh, I had to read that one. All right. And again, you see this slide just shows the portion of that Athens-Clarke County, Athens ACC Gov Transit received, that $552,106. And then UGA's portion was $828,160. And that's the total amount of STIC that we received for FY22. Also, let me just stop right there for a second. Something else I want to point out is that UGA did request their funds for FY22. We were not able to take any money out of FY22 because if we had taken money out of FY22's budget, we would have had to cut service. So we continued to negotiate, like I said, we started this in April of 21, all the way through to November of 21, which we're still working forward. But we wound up going to GDOT and saying, all right, we have no funding mechanism to provide them $828,160. There's no way we can do it. Is there any supplemental funding available? They said, yes, we always have supplemental funding, but do you have any that has no match? They allowed us to, and that's why we actually went on during the application process, we added the extra $828,160. I'm sure you guys remember when we applied for the 5307 application, we added those additional funds to that request. UGA did allow us to apply for that for FY23. So that means that in FY23, that's where those funds will come from to fund this new service. They are under ARC funds this time, which will be no match. But in FY24, we'll talk about that in the next steps. I don't want to go too far. Go to the next slide for us. This shows historic STIC funding. And you can just see that it speaks for itself. We got more STIC funding in 2020 and 21. Next slide, Victor. Thank you. All right. Our next steps, we want to try to get the transfer agreement approved as part of the agenda item. Complete the disparity study to ensure equitable transit access. We want to run a 6-month pilot program on Prince Avenue. It'll be Prince Avenue, North Avenue route for FY23. Analyze the data to evaluate cost benefit of the new service and ongoing negotiations with UGA and complete the transit development plan.
Any other questions?
I see this.
I gotta ask because I've been asked a lot by constituents.
Okay.
You know, what consideration has been given to service extending down Atlanta Highway toward like the Stonehenge area? I imagine that's part of the equity study or something. But just while we're here, if you have any insight on that.
Well, Jesse, you know, I love transit. Now you shouldn't have asked me that. I'm the worst person you could ask. I want transit everywhere. So, but let me tell you what our thoughts are. We're still looking at on-demand service in those areas. So do I have it? Can I say yes, we have it? No, but we did ask for some additional funding for in the T-SPLOS project. There was one T-SPLOS project that would have helped us get out there, and I don't think it made it through. So yes, I won't go into the weeds, but yes. I want to see transit everywhere. I mean, I rode transit, Jesse, so, I told you not to ask me that, but I rode transit. I used it to get to work. My kids used to go to work. So I just can't believe that we're not totally countywide by now. It's hard to believe. So it's on the vision. Right, Victor? I know you want to say so. I saw you like, come on. Yeah, I think he muted. You're muted. He's talking to you. Hold on.
Now?
Oh, yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. To add to what Pat mentioned, we're also exploring remote transfer terminals out along the Cleveland Road area. The county owns some land along Ben Burton Park. We have identified the possibility of adding a terminal out there, which would allow us to expand our transit network to the further reaches out towards Bogart Caterpillar area. Also, discussions going on with the ongoing mall development. We've looked at concepts to locate a remote transfer facility there as well. So once those hubs are in place, we would definitely be able to push a little bit further. But right now, due to time constraints with the current routing, that's really limiting the area that we can serve.
Thanks a lot, y'all.
All right.
Thanks for this presentation and all the very obvious hard work that underlied making this presentation possible.
Thank you all.
Tim?
All right.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, my question was on the pilots for Prince Avenue, North Avenue routes for FY23. Do y'all have a target start date for that pilot, when that would be happening in FY23?
Yeah, it was going to start in August of 23.
Okay, August of 23. Okay.
Yeah, August of 23.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Pat and Victor, I just want to say I thought your solution to kind of meeting some UGA needs, but community needs at the same time was pretty graceful. I mean, just the reality that prospective route would obviously for UGA's purposes capture the health science campus and the increasingly dense student population on North Avenue, but you would also get to Fowler Drive and the hospital and downtown generally. I thought that was a thoughtful way to introduce a new route. Love the idea of the 20-minute frequency. Pat, can you just in a couple words give us a general update about what the service delivery plan status is right now? I know you've engaged with a consulting group. How's that work progressing?
It's working really well. One of the issues we ran into was unleaded fuel. You know, it's gone up. So that's the only issue we faced. But the service, we got the service out there, but ran into some issues with unleaded fuel because now we're using smaller vehicles. So the people are happy we're moving people, but we had to go back in and move some money around for unleaded fuel. Yeah.
And on the future planning front, will you be returning to us, I guess, potentially post T-SPLOS passage to talk about how use of those dollars would integrate into the system?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
All right.
I think the best, I'm sorry, I just need to add that after the TDP, we'd like to kind of get some ideas from them. So knowing that there's going to be new funding, that'll be something that we'll discuss with them as soon as they come on board. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Anyone else? All right, everybody, stay warm and safe out there. You have a great night. Pat, Victor, Nikki, Blaine, everybody, thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Take care, you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night.